Hi, it's Glenn here and welcome back to the People's Carpenter. I'm sure you can hear that, hopefully you can, although hopefully it's not too loud and it's not drowning me out. There are fewer sounds more relaxing than the sound of rain on a metal roof when you're indoors anyway. I think it must release the same kind of endorphins as the sound of a cat purring. It's just very relaxing. Anyway, enough about that. So, earlier today, it's the middle of the night right now, earlier today I was working on a project and I realized, it's a can crusher actually, it's the first project on my project list, and I realized as I thought about the way that I was going to design this project that actually in the very first proper woodworking video in this channel I'm going to be going into what is potentially, is it advanced? I don't know, but it's really important piece of joinery, the mortise and tenon joint, which is one of the most traditional and sturdy and common pieces of joinery in old school woodworking and furniture building. And I realized that that would mean using a bunch of tools that I've recently bought, and I didn't want those tools to just sort of appear in the middle of the video. I haven't even unboxed them yet. They deserve more of a grand entrance than that. It would be kind of like you walking in on or suddenly catching a glimpse of your friend making out with his girlfriend and you didn't even know he had one. It's like, hang on, wait, you haven't introduced us. It's kind of an analogy on the fly. Well, I'm going to introduce you now to these tools. Come closer, get a look. I haven't laid eyes on them yet, but I'm looking forward to it. So, where to begin? I'm actually not sure what's what when it comes to these two. I'll just see if I can tell. Ah, yes. Yes, yes. Now, the order in which I should show you things. I'll start with the most simple thing. Now, this one is an order that I bought from Temu. And some people will be groaning at that. Others will be saying, well, that's good. I buy from Temu as well and I get a good deal. And what this is a square. That's all there is to it, just one little square. I've got some woodworking squares, but this is, in theory, a precision engineering square, which is more reliable than a lot of woodworking squares. Now, how do you test a square? Do you put it up to another square to see if it's the right angle? Or how do you know that that other square is accurate? I don't know. Looks good. That's probably not a very precise way of measuring things, but anyway, I've got that. That's going to be important in laying out your joinery. Here's the opening. Here we go. Came from a store in Australia called Timbecon. Oh, and there we are. Look at that. Why is that one wrapped differently? It's the same kind of product, just a different size. Well, I don't really mind. Maybe I do mind. These ones have got nice pouches. This doesn't have one. Huh. Why is that? Anyway, what these are is Narex brand mortising chisels. A mortising chisel is, well, it's a chisel, but it's a particular kind of chisel. I'll show you nasty old chisels that I've got kicking around on my workbench, or on my shelf. Mostly the reason they're nasty is that I've horribly abused them and used them to do things like dig out nails and all sorts of tasks that I shouldn't have used them for. Those could be quite serviceable, decent general purpose chisels, but they're not at the moment. Anyway, just for the sake of comparison, take a look at the difference in thickness between, I mean, there's no comparison at all. This Stanley chisel here, Stanley bench chisel, is, I mean, it's not ridiculously thin. It's a pretty ordinary thickness, but that Narex is very thick indeed. It's got a sort of grease on it. I'll give that a clean up. That's normal for a lot of tools as protectant while it's in transit. Narex chisels are made in the Czech Republic, and mortising chisels are as robust as they are because they are for cutting out the mortise, that is the hole in a mortise and tenon joint that the tenon, that is the extended piece of the other piece of wood, slots into. And there are 3 of these. There's one that is almost mistook the width for the thickness because it's so narrow. One that is 5 millimeters wide, one that is 10 millimeters wide, and one that is 12 millimeters wide. And so what I'm going to do, just to make my life easy, is, as a rule, create my tenons either 5, 10 or 12 millimeters wide, which means that the mortise that I cut will then be the right size for the tenon. Right, so put these out of the way. Now, do you need a special, a chisel specifically for mortising? Possibly not. Maybe you could do that with a general purpose chisel, but probably not as easily. And this is the traditional way, apparently. And they look nice. So, put those to one side, get rid of these nasty things. Yeah, I do wish that all 3 of them had their own pouch. Okay, there are several, in fact there are lots of types of chisel. I had to sort of do a bit of research and think about what I was actually going to be using my chisels for before I bought them, so that I didn't waste my money on chisels that I didn't need at all. Also from Timbecon. Oh, actually no, I'll open this one first. That's the one I intended to open next. Okay, this is not Narex, it is Luban, which is not quite as expensive. It's not to say they aren't good, but they're not regarded as being quite as flash. Now this is, I showed you those nasty old Stanley chisels earlier. This is like a really nice version of a set of those. These are what would be called bench chisels. Now bench chisels are just, they're kind of grunt chisels. They're very general purpose woodworking chisels. When I saw them, at a glance I thought that they were bevel edge chisels because they have a bevel on the edge, but they're not quite bevel edge chisels. These are, and I'll talk about the difference shortly. But nonetheless, they look decent. I'll decide whether or not they are decent, but you can use them for all sorts of things. You can use them for paring, which is basically removing material off surfaces. I imagine that I will use these for paring the tenon that I'm going to cut, and so you'll know shortly what that involves. But yeah, they're not for super fine work, and when I look at these ones I'll explain why they're not for super fine work. What makes them different from what we call proper bevel edge chisels is that although they have a bevel, the bevel is only on the top corner. It doesn't go right down to the flat bottom of the chisel, and that makes a difference to how you can use them, and I'll show you why. So these look nice, but I'll have more of a judgment once I've used them for a bit. When I say nice, I mean decent, not quite as nice as these, I think, but let's find out. So another Narex box. Well, the first Narex box actually, because the other Narex chisels are not in boxes. And what a nice box it is. look at the, oh no, it's, well, it is a nice box, but it's a broken nice box. And what's happened here? Something has been jostled around in transit, and that is broken. I will let them know about that, because that's not really what I signed up for. Yeah, that half of the latch on the front has been broken off completely. So the box is not super quality, but the chisels, well, they're another story. That's a little bit annoying. Yeah, we'll be contacting Timbecon. Right, so these are proper bevel edge chisels, and you can tell because the bevel goes all the way down to the flat back of them. Now when I say all the way down, not all the way down to a sharp point, that could be hazardous, but just about all the way down, and there's a slightly smoothed edge along the side for safety reasons. And the reason that that's good, and the reason that that makes these chisels more suitable for fine work, is that you take these two chisels here, they're both 16mm chisels, and suppose you were trying to slide that between two dovetails to clean out the material. With the bevel going all the way down to the flat base, you could get the edge of that chisel right up against the edge of the dovetail when you're cleaning that out. Because there is a flat surface on the sides of that chisel, you would actually cause a bit of bruising, a bit of damage to the side of the dovetail when you did that. So you can't really use these bench chisels for that purpose. And that's the reason that I got these ones. So I'll probably use these less often when I'm doing finer work. Okay, I should tidy some of this up. Okay, so that's when it comes, that's what I'll be using, partly what I'll be using when it comes to cutting the mortise, but of course you need to make a tenon to slide into the mortise. And it's a bit of a classic. It's a large tenon saw. My gosh. I mean, tenon saws can be quite large. Is that even a tenon saw? Is that going to be too large for a tenon? I don't know, maybe. It's a bit of a vintage classic though. Looking at the teeth. Okay, so those are, I won't go into how you can tell just by looking, but these are rip teeth, which is what you expect on a tenon saw, because when you're cutting a tenon, typically what you're doing is cutting into the end of the board, which means you're cutting with the grain, which is a rip cut. So you want rip teeth. Okay, this is my arsenal thus far. Oh, am I nervous or am I just excited? It's sometimes difficult to tell the difference, but this is the first time I have opened hand tools that are as nice as these, with the exception of that broken case. But other than that, yeah, I think it's excitement. Let's go! This is a slightly poorer quality video just because I'm using my phone. I'm in my workshop. I've been thinking about this saw. I mean, it seems like a decent saw, but it's just not a tenon saw. As I said, it's way too long. It is, as far as I can tell now, just a miter box saw with teeth that are not necessarily, maybe they're just not that well shaped, because they're slightly, like, they're not the perfect cross-cut configuration and they're not the perfect rip configuration, but I guess you get that once the saw's been resharpened quite a few times, maybe, depending on how well it's done. So yeah, I've got a miter box saw here, which is not very useful to me. It was definitely sold as a tenon saw. Ah, well, I'm going to have to keep looking.